Seguimos con la segunda ponencia internacional, la cual trata de estrategias y políticas de minimización de los residuos sólidos urbanos. La expositora es la señora Izabela Ratman Klosinska, del Instituto de Ecología de Áreas Industriales IETU, Polonia. El doctor Darwin Muñoz, nos acompaña una vez más para leer la semblanza de esta expositora internacional.
Okay. Izabela es coordinadora de los proyectos de comunicación, marketing y comercialización de la investigación. También es gerente del grupo de verificación tecnológica y ambiental del instituto, en lo que es un organismo de inspección acreditado por la ISO 17020. Como jefa de la oficina de coordinación de los proyectos, sus responsabilidades incluyen el establecimiento, desarrollo y mantenimiento de los contactos del IETU con socios nacionales e internacionales, administración, así como la gestión de proyectos internacionales, incluida la difusión y la comunicación y la interacción con las partes interesadas. Ha estado involucrada en una serie de proyectos financiados por la Unión Europea que abordan la gestión de residuos y la economía circular. Más recientemente participó en el desarrollo de una agenda estratégica de investigación e innovación dedicada al cierre del círculo para la recuperación de materiales de vehículos al final de su vida útil, envases plásticos de desecho y equipos electrónicos y eléctricos y electrónicos de desecho bajo un proyecto de la Unión Europea del programa Horizonte 2020, la red de innovación hacia el residuo cero, denominado New.net. Está involucrada en nuestro proyecto como parte estratégica del mismo, socia de Polonia, y también tiene una alta experiencia en el manejo tanto de economía circular y de modelos de negocio basado en lo que es la gestión de desechos sólidos. Como gerente del cuerpo del IETU, ella es responsable de la verificación independiente y externa de los resultados de tecnologías innovadoras para el tratamiento y monitoreo de aguas y aguas residuales en el marco del programa de verificación de tecnologías medioambientales de la Unión Europea. Es experta externa del Ministerio de Medio Ambiente allá en Polonia y Economía Circular, miembro del grupo directivo de la ETB, que es una iniciativa de la Unión Europea para el tema de las regulaciones en este tema, y miembro de la gestión medioambiental ISO TC 207, el capítulo 4, y también miembro del grupo de trabajo de alto nivel de la Unión Europea sobre el plan de acción de eco-innovación. Por lo que pueden ver, es una experta en estos temas de gestión de residuos sólidos, no solamente desde el punto de vista técnico, sino también de comercialización y del concepto de economía circular. Así que con ustedes, pues, Izabela Ratman desde Polonia.
Thank you very much, Darwin, for this introduction. Now everybody knows what the 30 years of my professional life have been about. Today I would like to present you something that is really the very beginning of waste management. Okay, I'm asked this one. Okay. So, as I have a privilege and honor to make this opening presentation on the technical issue, so I would like to start with a very important issue, which is the waste prevention thing. And I would like to give you a short overview on the strategies on waste prevention in the context of circular economy. Every waste has a meaning, and you know it better than me that waste is a problem, an economic problem, a social problem, an environmental problem. waste is also the source of greenhouse gases, basically methane, which is one of the key greenhouse gases. And waste everywhere in the world poses also problems to human health. However, waste is also a source of valuable materials that could be recovered and should be recovered, and this is a potential that should not be wasted. I have made an exercise to try and get some figures about the waste generation in the Latin America and the Caribbean countries. You could see that every inhabitant of the region generates nearly 1 kilogram of waste, of municipal solid waste. And when you take this into the context of the overall municipal waste generated, it is up to 67%. So a huge potential that could be used and that should be, and with which something should be done. Unfortunately, the levels of recycling for the region are very, very low. It's only 2.2%, and still the data is also missing to give the proper estimate. But here I wanted to say that in Europe, we also, and in Poland, we also cannot say that we have been really perfect in that recycling thing. The level of recycling in Poland right now is on the level of 20%, so more than the 2.2%, but still it's not something that is impressive. That is why we are also in a kind of a learning process, a little bit more advanced, but at the mistakes that we have made, you got the basis to learn and to avoid them. One of the key problems to setting up any kind of a strategies is missing data. And this is what I want to highlight, that if any kind of a strategy, if any kind of a planning is to be done, the key issue is to get the right data, to have a good understanding on the whole situation. And I would refer to that in my next slides. There is a number, you could see that the domestic waste posed a lot of percentage in the total volume of municipal waste generated in Latin American countries. And there are some waste streams that should be paid special attention to. And these waste streams include biodegradable waste, paper waste, packaging waste, food waste, which is a big problem also in Europe, electric and electronic devices, and hazardous waste that really need to be properly handled because they pose the risk to human health the most. These new resources, the new approaches require a new way of thinking. I'm sure that the concept of circular economy has also reached the Latin American countries. But very often, the concept of circular economy is only associated with recycling, which is not true. This is the new way of thinking, the life cycle approach, in which prevention of waste generation plays a very important thing. Because what we are focusing here is to maintain the value of materials within their use cycle as long as possible. This is not an easy exercise. The proof is that right now in Europe there are so many projects being launched on how to approach the circular economy concept in the best way. And we are only now waiting also on the results. Darwin mentioned one of the projects that we have just finished on circular economy that was related to end-of-life vehicles, to waste electric and electronic equipment. And that project, for example, allowed to set up a research and innovation strategy for the European Commission on which actions are needed in order to arrive to the near zero waste objective. I wanted to present to you this famous, I call it the circular economy heart, with those two circles. Oops. On the left and on the right, and the positioning of the prevention strategies in this diagram. You can see on it that the closer the circle, the more inner the circle, the tighter, the more strategic value of the measures that are included under it. And I would like to focus on the rest of my slides exactly on the red circle. The new way of thinking required also a shift in the paradigm on how the waste is being handled. Normally, landfilling was a standard procedure. But once you start evaluating the potential of waste, you would see that it is the prevention, all the actions dedicated not to generate this waste that should be on the top of the hierarchy. And these are the approaches that we are trying to implement right now in Europe and in Poland. The prevention basically targets all the actions before any waste is being generated, before we start talking about recycling, energy recovery, and landfilling. There are a series of actions that are relevant for prevention strategies, and they begin already in the way materials and goods are being produced, in the way they are being distributed, transported, sold. They also include some consumer behavior activities and habits that are related to the way people purchase. Let me give you just an example. Sometimes in Europe, and I think it's also here as well, when you go to the cinema, they would offer you a big paper cup of popcorn. Although they know that you will not eat it all because it's just too big. But because there is some manipulation with the price and stimulating that, okay, this is, if you buy big, it will be cheaper. Yes? So, these are the kinds of actions that should be prevented, that should not take place. Consumers should have better awareness on what they are buying and how they are buying. Prevention is also about the reuse and remanufacturing of products and setting up the systems that enable that kind of approaches, incentivize it. A lot of work needs to be done also on the public acceptance of goods that could be reused or that come from recycled materials. In Europe, we have done a very interesting project on construction and demolition waste. And we identified that one of the reasons why people are not interested in reusing things is that they think it's rubbish. Although these products could be perfectly reused, they think it's the mentality of people saying it's rubbish, somebody used it. So I want everything new. So a lot of actions in the strategies needs to be done also on this consumer behavior. When you take a look on the types of strategies that can be used for setting up waste prevention programs, there are 3 types of them. And depending on the type of the strategy, the involvement of the government also differs. Towards the regulatory issues, you would see that the role of the government is the strongest one, because this is the place where you already start imposing things. And I would like to give you some examples for each of those 3 categories of strategies and measures that could be taken account of when setting up this type of a strategy. The first type are the informational strategies. And these strategies are basically aimed at setting the awareness of the waste problem, identifying who has what type of responsibilities in this problem. It's also about providing training and information to those who are responsible for organizing waste management in the country. It is also about using the different tools that are available, like eco-labels that are quite popular in Europe, to identify the environmental impacts of individual products. So the examples of the actions here, and one of a very important thing, these actions, to be successful, they must be visible and they must bring immediate results. That is why the actions could be very simple ones, but making a very quick difference, like bringing your own bags when you go shopping, instead of taking plastic bags. In many countries in Europe, and in Poland as well, they have introduced a very simple system. If you don't bring your own plastic bag, you have to pay a small fee. And you could see immediately how the amount of plastic bags in the shops has been reduced. Another thing, in many countries, and I'm pretty sure here in the Dominican Republic as well, everybody got this junk mail, all the advertisements, commercials into a post box. Simple way, simple stickers saying, I don't want this stuff. If somebody doesn't want it, then they don't print it. So in this way, you, through very simple but very clear actions, you avoid generating waste. Another action here, which is very important, and which just starts right now in many countries, but also in many regions in Europe, are the portals that are dedicated to businesses, like stock exchanges of secondary raw materials, where you can sell and buy things, and this is dedicated basically to businesses. The second type of strategies is so-called promotional strategies, and they are basically dedicated to creating this capacity of establishing a waste prevention community. It is also about providing appropriate financial and logistical support to initiatives that help prevent waste generation. And here, innovation and research programs and education of students can play a very important role. However, of very high importance are also different types of voluntary agreements. The voluntary agreements are very often dedicated to specific sectors. I have selected a very new initiative from the United Kingdom, which is a very good example of an agreement dedicated to a specific sector that involves different actors, NGOs, industries, with very specific targets, just to do something with plastics in the UK. Another example of an initiative is something that I took from Poland. It's something that prevents food waste generation. We have a system of 32 food banks that identify places, organizations that have too much food, surplus of food. They collect this food and cooperate with charity organizations that then distribute the food to those who need it. And finally, the regulatory strategies. And these are the most important, as they actually no longer involve any voluntary things. They set up the rules. And here, we can talk about strategies and measures that involve things like disposal bans, so preventing disposal of some types of waste on landfills. It's also the obligation of some manufacturers to recycle their stuff, like it happens in the electric and electronic equipment. And you will hear more about it from our colleague from Fraunhofer, Thorsten, who will talk about the extended producer responsibility. Another thing that is important, but still, at least in Poland, we have some problems with implementing it. It's the green public procurement. A lot of things could be done when, for example, public organizations, public institutions declare voluntarily to use certain rules on the way they procure. Like Ministry of Environment could declare that they would buy only a recycled paper for printing their letters. Another thing is that whenever you organize any events like catering, you only use glass plates, you don't use any plastic stuff. So all these kind of activities could be quite important. And the eco-design requirement. It is a big discussion right now in Europe on the eco-design and setting up performance standards on different products so that they could involve recycled materials. An example of a regulatory strategy, again from Poland, and the reason why I'm showing this is that there was a lot of interest from our Dominican colleagues who visited Poland, as Henrik said 2 months ago, on how the waste collection system is being organized. So we're using this pay-as-you-throw principle for calculating the charges that the citizens have to pay for the waste disposal. And there is a very interesting system and a very simple system based on the declarations, whether you segregate your waste or you don't segregate your waste, and the fees depend on the declaration. And that is then being supervised. How are you fulfilling the obligation in your declaration? If you're not able to do so, then you change your declaration, but you have to pay more for your waste disposal. The waste prevention strategy could be a standalone document, but it will always operate in a certain context. Definitely here in the Dominican Republic and in Guatemala, there is a whole system of other legal regulations where the strategies should be linked to. And I would highlight once again the importance of the research and development and innovation strategy as well in implementing the prevention strategies, as there is a lot of activities that could be and measures that could be introduced here. In Poland, the waste prevention strategy is a standalone document, but again, very closely linked with the waste management plan, the National Waste Management Plan, and of course the environmental protection policy. Setting up a waste prevention program requires, it's a process. It starts with a vision through the objectives, and the objectives are country-specific through the priority areas. It is up to the country to identify where are the hotspots, where are the bottlenecks that needs to be addressed in the strategy, and then finding the measures that would be the most efficient way to address those priority areas. It is also a process, as I mentioned, that needs to be started with the good support of data. It is something that requires a constant monitoring and adaptation if any changes are being made. It is also something that involves many stakeholders and building compromises among them, because their points of view and their interests very often might be conflicting. I would like to finish my presentation with this as an introductory part. These are the two pictures I've taken just walking through Santo Domingo, and yesterday in the afternoon we have seen a very, very nice activity that we really appreciated with the young guys picking up all the plastic, and I think that these are the initiatives that are really worth support.